Good afternoon. Welcome to today's discussion about IEPs and students. And today we're going to do the introduction to the IEP Toolkit, which will be revealed and available to you later this week. But this is going to be sort of the first 12 minutes will be kind of a repeat of what we were talking about on Friday when, typhoon thunderstorm blew me off my front porch and then I lost power, so I couldn't finish our session on Friday. So we'll just start from there. And, we're going to start with a question, and the question is, why do I have to be an advocate for my child? Why can't the school just do it? Why can't they figure it out? Why can't they just know what my child needs and it's their legal duty to provide them with a free and appropriate public education. So why don't they just do that? Why do I have to be involved as a parent? Why do I have to be involved as a grandparent, as a caregiver, as a guardian, whatever it is? The reason is simple. There's way more students than there are administrators and educators, and no one knows the child better than the people that they live with. Um, you have been educating your child since the minute they were born. You taught them how to hold on to your finger, and then you taught them that, this was their nose, this was their ear, this was their eye, and their name, and mama, and papa, and dada, and all those things. And, you taught them you know, to, you know, you point to things that they wanted before they could talk. And so, as children's first educators, you have watched them develop, you've watched them learn, you've watched them hit milestones or not, and you have monitored progress. If you were, a crazy mom like me, when I had my daughter, I was reading that book every other day to make sure that, she was okay and everything was going properly and progressing properly. And it was like, mad mom. But anyway, so that's why parents are such a significant part of the development of an IEP. Um, and so what I wanted to kind of touch on today is really, what is advocacy? What does that mean? What is it to be an advocate? And basically, um, advocacy is, you know, comes from there's basically 5 rules of good advocacy. And the first one is clarity of purpose. And the purpose is clear: to make sure that the child or children get a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. The clarity of that purpose, however, is what breaks it down. And it's, is the child, need help in this area versus this area? Is it developmental? Is it psychological? Is it physical? And what do I know as a parent about my child? Like, do I know that when I use books about sports to help my son with sight words or with reading, that he is more engaged than if they're books about 2 bunnies having a picnic in the forest? This is the critical piece. It seems minor, but from before your child even gets to school how your child learns, how they engage, what keeps them engaged. Granted, as kids get older, their attention spans get smaller often, and they're distracted by more things often. And so that all has to be incorporated. If a student is learning in an isolated space at home and they're excelling and able to focus, then that's something that you as a parent need to bring to the table so that they have a quiet place with distraction free uh, environment to take their tests in. If they can't finish a task in the amount of time at home, then they're never going to be able to complete a test in the amount of time at school. Remember that, there's a relationship between performance and anxiety, um, and often the environment is something that you can adjust to diffuse both the anxiety as well as, any other stressors kids feel. So that clarity of purpose, it's not just to make my child do better in school. It's it's to it's to explain the environmental uh, differences as well as the psychological or physical setting, or other supports and aids that might help to promote the purpose of getting a child to where they're supposed to be, and giving them equal access to education. Another issue with advocacy is that it safeguards confidential information and confidentiality. And certainly, everyone knows that school records are protected, and that things that aren't in writing didn't happen. So if you ever need to enforce anything in school, it has to have been in writing. It doesn't have to be in the IEP, but it has to be in writing. It could be an email trail. It could be notes going back and forth. Um, it could be text messages. I hate the text message thing for this, but it could be. Um, Another element of good advocacy is being cognizant of equality and diversity, and how, um, you know, recognizing that all children deserve access to education and access to the curriculum, and to progress in their education, but not all children are created equal. And we know that. And we know that they're not created equal because some of them learn how to read at 3 and some of them learn how to read at 7. Um, and so this notion of individualized education, which is at the root of every IEP, or it should be, um, it does consider equality and diversity in recognizing this need for individualized planning and learning. Being a good advocate is empowering. You're not only empowering yourself, but you're empowering the team, that you're going to give the team helpful information, and you're empowering your child that education is important enough to them, or for you to be involved, because um, it's very helpful for children to understand why this meeting's happening and what support is being given to them, and that it's not because they're broken or flawed or have something wrong with them. Often, especially older kids who are evaluated for the first time in middle school or high school, they kind of take on this, well, I'm different because I'm broken. I'm dumb. And so it's really, really important to not only empower the team, but always remember to empower your child as well, that there's nothing wrong with them, that nothing bad happened to them, that it's not their fault, and that, we're just going to do everything we can to make sure that they get the best education they can. But remember, FAPE is appropriate education and not the best education. Um, the other thing about being an advocate for your child that's really important is because you are telling the team that you're putting your child first, and that it's not okay for them to say, no, we're not giving that to other children, so we're not going to give it to your child. You have to keep the team focused on your child, what your child needs, and what is feasible and reasonable um, and necessary. And all of that can be informative from the evaluations and the different uh, educators, or I'll call them, imposter educators, such as the babysitter and the tutor, and the ones who are playing those roles but don't necessarily have a degree. Um, and then, really, the most important thing is that being a good advocate, um, it causes you to influence decision making, because you're putting in that personal piece. It's not, obviously, it's what's on the paper from the evaluations and what's being interpreted, but what the results mean. But it's also saying, you know, why would my child need that requires writing when he can't write? Um, because you see at home what he or she is engaging in, And sometimes no one on the team has been your child's teacher before. Sometimes they have. Sometimes they're, in the middle of the school year. So the gen ed and the special ed teacher who are in the room do know the child. Sometimes if they have a directed study team where the kids stay together in high school with this one directed study teacher throughout their entire tenure in high school, then obviously that is a really valuable person that will be able to talk about how this child learns in a one-on-one, in a small group, in a group, how they take their tests, how they are with scheduling, how they are with organization, and all of the things that matter to succeed in high school and college, if that's what the goal is for what's happening next. So it's really, really, really important to prepare and plan, understand, um, and to be able to talk about all of that as an advocate for your child. And that's what the IEP toolkit that we've created really helps people do. And it just basically talks about how um, how to look at the information from a parent's standpoint and understand what it means so that you can be the best advocate. We've talked about before the importance of understanding your child's disability and not just like what it says in the DSM 5, but put that mindset in a classroom and think about it and talk to your child. Say, when you are asked to read a paragraph, do you read, tell me about how you read and get an understanding for, you know, where the disconnect is. Where does the most focused, directed aid that we can give this child for them to succeed? And, for example, a lot of kids have auditory processing disorders. What that means is that they have a lapse in time between looking at the math problem and engaging in the answer. So if it says 2 plus 2, it's not automatic and without thought that that child can put a 4. They have to process that it's a math problem. Then they have to process the 2 plus 2. Then they have to process it's 4. And then they have to process to put the 4 on the paper. So that's very different than 2 plus 2, 4. Okay, so it's things like that and understanding how it it translates into the classroom that really you as the parent are going to have to explain, especially with ADHD, because lots and lots and lots of kids have ADHD, lots and lots of kids have ADD, and every child has the manifestations of ADD or ADHD different if they have that disability. So you need to understand your child individually, how it translates into the classroom. And it may be you can ask the evaluator, how did you see it manifest itself while you were doing your testing? Was it different during verbal testing versus written testing? Was it different when you asked a question out loud and then had the student write the answer? Or, or what kinds of safeguards, supports, accommodations have you recommended or have you seen be successful with other kids who learn the way my child does? So you want to talk to those people to prepare, you want to talk to your child. Your child knows what the struggle is, knows where the anxiety comes in, knows when they're at a total point of being overwhelmed and can't perform. And those are pretty uniform feelings that struggling learners have, no matter what their disability is. So understand that translation as a parent. The other thing, you know, that you should be in your preparation and planning is you really should know what the IEP form looks like and what each section of the IEP is comprised of and why it's there. Some of it are notice provisions. Some of it are compliance with the law provisions. Some of it are explanations. Some of them is goals and time frames and things like that. And if you can understand the difference between, each of these sections before you get there, then you're going to be able to ask the right questions at the right time or at advocate at the right time for the right things. So it's very important to um, to have a blank one of those forms, and 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 basically start. If this is your first IEP, it's gonna be really hard for you to figure out what goes where because it is its own language. And everything is abbreviated. The ABCs of special ed. We've talked about that before. So, um, but if you have the child's past IEP, before you get to the meeting, you need to prep and you need to look at the past year's IEPs. You need to take note of what services were recommended. Was there progress in those areas? If there wasn't, how did the next IEP address the lack of progress? If there was, how did they extend the goals to the next IEP to continue the progress? The biggest problem that we have now that we've never had before is that we have no baseline data. We don't know where these kids are. So they're all going into the next school year and their evaluations are outdated and the progress isn't monitored because of the stay-at-home order. So kids usually fall behind in the summer, but what about the 3 months before the summer when they didn't have necessarily access to education that they would have if they were in a brick and mortar school? So this IEP is going to be the most important because not only are you setting a trend forward, but you are really need to have some of these assessments done over the summer so that you do have baseline data so you can do a constructive IEP in the fall and go forward and your child will succeed. I am recommending to my clients that they also ask to have distance learning or contingency provisions in the IEP because we could be at home again. Actually, it hasn't even been announced that we're not going to be at home for school in the fall. So that's really important. And I just sat in an IEP meeting a few weeks ago where the district refused. They would not put it in. They absolutely would not put it in. And it was so we did an addendum of parent concerns after we got the document and we put it in there. So that's a really important issue that there's no baseline data and how are we going to constructively and according to the law create an individualized education plan for each student when we don't know where they are right now. So uh, that again is part of the prepping and planning is knowing where your child has been so that you can advocate for where they should go. And it's not just academic. It can be anything. It can be learning how to tie their shoes. It could be putting their shoes on the correct feet. It could be how to hold a pencil. It could be, um, writing with fatter instruments as opposed to thinner instruments, markers versus pencil. It could be learning how to write on the lines, or even handwriting, which no one learns and no one really stresses anymore, but sometimes you do need to sign your name. So it's not just reading, writing, math. Um, it's more than that. It's science. It's social studies. It's computers. It's robotics. It's a lot of kids do really well as kinesthetic learners. With the tactile stimulation to learn. So, again, and this was, I think now like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the 4 different kinds of learners. really important in your prep and planning to know how your child learns. Because if you know how they learn, then you can advocate for how they need to be taught. And that could be maybe they need the notes ahead of time. Maybe they need a individual meeting with the teacher a few days before the test to do a review one-on-one. Maybe, the sky's the limit of what you can ask for. So be creative in thinking about the prepping and planning, how your child learns, how your child needs to be taught, and how your child is going to succeed. Um, so the another thing that is really important, and if you plan and you're prepared, then this will automatically take care of itself. But one of the mistakes that parents make is that because it is their child, it is their baby, and they want everything to be okay, they often bring their emotions into the meeting. There's no room for emotions in an IEP meeting. This is strictly business. And the more you prepare, the more you have it planned, the more you understand your child's disability, the more constructive it can be. Now, a couple things. First of all, if they ever tell you that it can only be an hour, that's crap. It takes as long as it takes. Second, if you believe someone needs to be at the meeting and they're not available, you have an absolute right to continue the meeting. And then thirdly, if you receive an IEP in advance that is going to be the working document, or if they tell you that this is the IEP, you absolutely should object. Predetermination of what should be in an IEP is illegal, and they cannot do that. They can send you, kind of a draft that doesn't have, that is, kind of the, has the areas that need help uh, kind of listed. And but you want to make sure in your preparation and planning, if you do get it that way, go look, make sure that if your child got, 4 hours a month of occupational therapy last year, and this year they're only getting 2 per month, 2 hours per month, one of your questions is going to be why? Why are we decreasing? And then you'll look at the goals and you'll see if the child 100% met the goal. If they met the goal early, then maybe you can reduce it. But I'm sure there's other fine motor skills that were not addressed or measured because they don't measure all of them. So before any service is cut, you always want to ask the question, why? What, which measure are we going off of? Why does my child need more? Why does my child need less? I think my child needs more because when he or she helps me make cookies, they have a lot of trouble turning on the mixer, pushing that button. And no matter how many times I show them which button, they cannot push the button. Their fingers do not let them have the agility to do that. So you don't have to be comparing schoolwork to schoolwork about when it comes to physical skills and especially fine motor. So the other things that you should gather to plan and prep and be a good advocate for your child are test scores, evaluations, all of them for years. And just bring in a binder or a divided folder, whichever kind of person you are, and be able to say, yes, my child still needs X because, and you're the one with the information, especially if they're changing from like kindergarten to lower school to upper school to middle school to high school. Yeah, their whole folder is going to come with them, but who's reading it? And so keep that in mind. Um, it's also really important to take notes during the meeting. You can record the meeting. You just have to tell them in advance that you're going to do it. And you really want to understand and be ready to talk about how the progress is going to be measured. Remember that anybody who's in the classroom or anybody who's at home or anyone involved in the learning process should be able to understand and evaluate the progress on any given day. So it needs to be specific. Um, the Make sure that you have everything, um, you know, written down for, your own goals for your child. What do you want? What is the most important thing that you have to leave the meeting accomplishing for your child? You want to understand what the school wants. And hopefully you're both on the same page. But if you're not, you need to be informed about what your remedies are, and you need to figure out if you have support for your position, or do they have support for their position, or do you both have support and there's something that isn't being considered. You also want to know, and you need to sort of plan in advance what action you want the school to take. Um, and then you want to evaluate how motivated they are to give you what you want. And if there's any obstacles of what will prevent them from giving you what you want, for example, you want your child to have more speech and language skills, but your district only has one speech pathologist. Does that mean your child doesn't get what they need? No. So you just need to insist. They may have to get a speech and language pathologist on a contract basis. They may have to, it may be something that's provided outside of school that that the district reimburses you for. It may be someone they borrow from another building. Um, but that is really, really important. Um, make sure you have a written list of concerns before you go. That is probably the most important thing that a parent can bring to the meeting. And if you can get your concerns in writing ahead of the meeting and make the team aware, then they may come to the meeting with solutions to your concerns, which is really ideal. Um, and remember that, a lot of times the interaction between parents and educators, it goes one of a couple of ways. Either the parents go in there, they're totally deferential, you're the educator, you know what's best for my child, go, thanks, let me sign the paper. The other extreme is, I know I'm the parent, I know what's best for my child, and you need to just do it my way. Neither one of those are really helpful for the child. Really, the best way to advocate for your child, to have a successful plan for your child, is to be very transparent. And for the school officials to also be very transparent. So, ahead of time, you have a right to know who's going to be at the meeting. You have a right to ask for other people to be at the meeting. Again, do it ahead of time. If you have concerns that you want addressed at the meeting, it's not fair to walk in there and demand answers. It's fair if you send them those concerns ahead of time, and then they are prepared in the way that they should be to discuss them with you and to address them and to create a plan that's most beneficial to your child. So that is really, really important. Um, you should bring extra copies of everything just in case you refer to something or you're adopting recommendations from something and the rest of the team doesn't have it. Remember, it's called a team. So everyone should be looking out for the best interests of the child, and everyone should be equally considered and valued because you're a team. Again, the more you know before you go, the better result you're going to have. Sometimes parents are seen and not heard in IEP meetings. Recently, I was in an IEP meeting. We had tons of questions, and the parent and tons of concerns, and the parent concern section had like two of them. And so we emailed a list right after the meeting, um, and asked to reconvene in order to address these concerns that we still had. And we reconvened. And at the next meeting, they really weren't addressed. And they just took our list and stapled it to the back of the IEP as more parent concerns. But it didn't, none of them were addressed. And when that happens, then you end up in litigation. And that is really avoidable if everyone is acting as part of the team, their role, their expertise. Every single person there is there for a reason. You know, the general education teacher who's required to be there is there to explain the general ed curriculum. The special education teacher that's there is there to explain that those services and that curriculum, and how with those services it can help a child receive the free and appropriate public education that the general ed students are having, or children without disabilities. So you always, as I said, this is a team. There should be no blaming, there should be no criticizing, there should be no accusations. This is not a question if they like your child or dislike your child. The law requires them to individually educate your child with what your child needs based on your child's disability. It's your job as a parent to help them understand what that is. And so, with that, we will end today. We will continue tomorrow, and the introduction to the toolkit, and I'm really excited to introduce it to you at the end of the week. So have a great day, and enjoy the sunshine, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.